Good morning, good evening, and good night. I didn't really plan on making another video on the Amazing Digital Circus because I just wanted to talk about how I felt in that moment. That was the last video, but turns out there's a lot more stuff I can talk about it more in depth on the show, and I'm gonna yap about it. I even dressed up. Look, I'm like Kane. No, I'm not because I couldn't find a fucking red suit. So this is the closest thing to red I have. It's like a burgundy suit. I don't have a suit for Kane, but I'm trying. Anyways, all right, let's check the list. All right, we got a freaking lot to go over from these last few episodes. I guess an easy one we can go for is Gangle. Let's start off with Gangle.
Why can't I cry for him?
Let's start off with Gangle's reaction to Jax's abstraction. That kind of rhymes. Reaction, abstraction.
What?
Anyways, so at first, Gangle is just unable to cry, right? Despite being literally her entire thing or being known as the one who cries,
isn't your
she's
fault.
unable to cry for Jax when they abstract, right? Why is this?
Why can't
Because, well, I mean, it makes sense. Jax tormented her the most of everyone, right? Now, obviously,
How about
Jax
we call
torments
her
specifically the
Gangle?
girls,
That sounds about as pathetic
because
as you love.
obviously of Jax's
choice,
own
Gangle.
unresolved
Probably should
trans
add that right
issues
into the system.
and all that sort of stuff. That's why they attacked mostly the girls and
It
stuff,
looks
right?
like I've taken Ragatha
So, which makes
and
sense.
dropped
But
her
why
in the
Gangle
deep
specifically,
fryer.
we can chalk it up to probably the fact that it was Gangle, the first one who came to the circus after Ribbit's abstraction, and also the fact that both Pomni and Zubul aren't as passive to Jax's bullshit as Gangle is, right? Gangle just sort of takes it a lot more and just is a much easier victim, to be honest. And Zubul and Pomni are not. Right, they're willing to call out Jax on their bullshit most of the time. So that's why Gangle's tormented. So obviously she's not gonna feel sad for the abstraction of Jax because fuck him, right? Or her. Sorry. Gandalf's not gonna feel bad for the abstraction of Jax because fuck Jax. They tormented her for
This
God
isn't
knows
your
how long. I don't know
fault.
how many years they were in there, but a long time. And yet,
Why can't I
when we see Jax being lured into lured is a good word, lured into the tent, right? The abstracted version of Jax. That's when Gandalf starts to cry, right? Obviously, lots of people on the internet have been saying, and this is true. It's the realization that despite all the harm that Jax inflicted, they were still human, right? Jax was still a human. She still deserved compassion and care. And even now that she's gone, she still deserves grief and remembering of who that person was, right? And that care, that Gangle seeing that care employed by their friends is like, oh shit, yeah, they were a horrible person to me. But at the end of the day, they're a human, right? They're a human with their own life. And that was a loss. That was a loss of human life, right? Who also deserved to be treated with care and respect and have people who loved them, right? And that's why she cries. And as Zubul says, having lots of complex emotions. Because those are complex emotions. Because you feel bad, but you also are happy that the person who tortured you is gone. Because you could sort of feel like there's certain relief in Gangle that Jax abstracted. Because no more tormenting in that sense, right? So, again, complex emotions. On another hindsight of a Gangle, this is a good transition into what I'm going to talk about Jax and the implied nature of the Amazing Digital Circus. Gangle was never outright stated to have been in an accident. That has never happened. Nowhere in the show that I can remember to the best of my collection do they specifically say Gangle or Zoe, her human, was in an accident where they got hit by a truck. They never say that. It is implied heavily. Episode 4, Gangle hits him by a truck. Episode 8, Kane tortures her with a truck hitting. And episode 9, we know that Zoe was recovering from injuries in the human world, right? However, none of this tells us that she was hit by a truck. This is all implied. It's true. It is still true, but it's not told to us Netflix style. Zoe/Gangle was hit by a truck. That's not said because we have the ability to understand what they're trying to tell us without them directly telling us. This now goes on to a perfect segue, Jax being trans. Wow, the heavy implications of Jax being trans turned out to be true. Who would have guessed? The egg metaphor of someone who's trans but hasn't come out yet or accepted it is like an egg in an egg and waiting to be hatched open and crack open as their true self. Jax says it in episode 6, discussing with Pomni. Here's I found this actually that reminds me this really cool and fucked up artwork that I really like. It's kind of cool. It's kind of fucked up, but hey, the egg, right? Egg? No? Okay. More stuff. Jax's reaction to the maid dress. Jax's entire personality against torturing the woman of the circus and all that stuff. We also can talk about it how there are points where Jax does and doesn't have their bunny tail, and yet they say that that is the pinnacle of their masculinity, and right in that moment, the tail isn't there because they're not a goddamn man. That's a woman. That's a very pretty woman. Again, pretty woman. Lovely woman. Isn't she lovely? Stevie Wonder's song played during the Jax montage. Stevie Wonder's song, which was made for his daughter's birth, if I remember correctly, as in the birth of a new person, the birth of a daughter, right, is played during Jax because that's the first time that we see Jax with the knowledge that she is a woman, right? With the knowledge that she's a girl, right? So, isn't she lovely? Sort of signifying us the new birth, quote unquote, the hatching of the egg of who Jax is, right? Who is a woman, right? This also is further cemented by, of course, the conversation with Ribbit. Again, I really love that scene. The conversation with Ribbit and the personal thing that Jax told their mother, which would then cause their mother to berate them even more. And there was a thing that Jax said in order to get their mother off of their back, in order for her to stop looking at Jax as her father, which is very clearly could have probably been, yo, mom, I'm a girl, right? Thinking that they would get away from their father's like shadow of how they tormented Jax because of their father. But no, it just caused them to just berate them more. And of course, a fucked up family is a fucked up family, so obviously no one's going to come out of there with sane mind. That's a very good indicator of Jax being trans. Ribbit putting a goddamn little cute little thing and Jax blushing just instantly. Like that's it. I feel like that's that scene, this scene right here where we see Jax just enjoy the little ribbon and then look back at Ribbit. It's just so beautiful because like I feel like that's the only time in the entire show, up to this point in the show, that we see Jax's true self, and it's just so heartwarming. It's just heartwarming, right? Ignore the whole thing that happened because Kaufmo went in there and thought they were having sex, but whatever. We then, of course, can go on to the fact that despite being trans, I know people are gonna have been arguing with this a lot, but it doesn't mean that Jax was not a shitty fucking person. They were a horrible person. Gangle suffered the most of it. Ribbit suffered. Kaufmo suffered. Like, that is just not a way to treat people. We now understand, right, where Jax came from in all this abuse and all this being shitty, right? We understand it as an audience and as Pomni, because this is also Pomni when she's with Jax. We understand it. That does not mean that it's justified. It does not mean that we can forgive her, right? Jax did horrible things. That's never going to change. But that's also part of what the story is about, and what Gangle also realized. Yes, they were a horrible person, but they're still human. We can still understand them and appreciate them and try to make them do better, which is also what Pomni does. This is an important thing in Pomni. Despite Jax consistently refusing help, right? When Jax is falling, as we see that metaphorically in the mind space type of place, Jax is falling. They're just falling. They accept it. They don't want help. But when you're falling, sometimes your hands are still out there, and Pomni sees it and takes her hand, right? Because it's a normal, I feel like it's in general a human normal thing to do, to try to help if you can, right? I think both Pomni and Ragatha are very good examples of this in 3 different ways. Ragatha tried to help Jax by doing what Jax wanted, right? Keeping the promise about Ribbit and all that stuff. That didn't work, but Ragatha was trying to help Jax, right? That's still trying to help. It's still a commendable effort, and it's still a very human thing to do. Pomni, in that really fucked up, I don't really like what Pomni says, but it makes sense. I can fix you, right? To Jax, the weird, crazy Jax who has lost Ragatha. I can fix you. She's like sort of scrambling for words, doesn't really know what to say, but she's trying to make an attempt to help Jax. That's not the right attempt. You can't just say, I can fix you to people, because that's not really how it works. But again, we see them trying to help Jax. Same thing at the end in the mind space. Pomni finally reaches Jax and finally they open up to each other and they can finally talk, and Pomni can finally see Jax's secret, which we can say, yeah, she never tells anyone about it, because why would she? We saw how Jax was very personal about that secret, about being trans, and never told anyone. Why would Pomni ruin that secret for her, right? I feel like I understand that. Right? I don't know if eventually Pomni will tell everyone that, yo, Jax was trans, right? In order for everyone else to properly understand Jax in some way, but we'll see. This also goes on a good tangent to the abstractions and de-abstraction. Is it possible? Seems like it. Certain implications could say yes. I like that idea. I'm also not the biggest fan of it, purely because, like, if we go off what this entire show is, which is, frankly, mental illnesses and what goes on in here, an abstraction is giving up, as they've said, with Kaufmo giving up and the giving up so easily and stuff like that. Is an abstraction a bit like death? When someone has a very fucked up disease and they just give up and they let the disease take them, giving up. When someone gives up in life through depression and stuff, that's suicide. That's death, right? When people give up in real life, they usually die, right? That's just how mental illnesses work. I'm sorry. Mental illnesses, especially among marginalized groups like trans people, is a fucking heavy thing to deal with. And it would be a lie to say not many people kill themselves because of mental illnesses, because a lot of people, even more nowadays than there should be. So I feel like abstraction is a good way to think of it as death, and more literal of giving up, of, killing yourself. But I also like the designs of the abstractions because of this, because they can only watch or act in hostility, right? They only have a bunch of eyes, right, as you can see, and they only attack unless in darkness, right? And here there's a few things, right? Why the eyes? So they just observe. They observe life. They no longer directly interact with it because they've given up. They're no longer part of life. They've chosen to no longer live life, so they're only going to watch it, which is not a fun way to live, right? When you give up, because you've given up, you're forfeiting life. Life is so awesome, right? Well, no, everything is not awesome all of the time. That's an unrealistic expectation, like they say in the Lego Movie Part 2. But they're aggressive, right? Sometimes when they in the light and stuff. This is also very akin to like ghosts. You know how ghosts aren't in this mortal plane? Like if there were a ghost right here, it would only be listening to us and watching us. Or it could be like one of those more aggressive ghosts and do like, ooh, weird, spooky attacking things. But again, ghosts, what does ghosts mean? Dead. Abstractions, I feel like abstractions are pretty dead people. I don't feel like they're going to be coming back. This also is further cemented by the fact that we never see an abstraction occur. We never see it, right? And we go back to the suicide metaphor. It can be very inherent that usually when people kill themselves, they're not with anyone else. They're alone, right? Which sucks. Let's be honest here. It absolutely sucks. But that's the truth of it. So of course we're not going to see the abstractions, because the likelihood of someone maybe seeing an abstraction would maybe stop the abstraction. As it is, when someone sees someone about to kill themselves, sometimes that helps them stop, right? You could like pull them back physically or like, spiritually. Anyways, what I mean to say is mental illnesses suck. People have it in their nature to help other people when they see that they're struggling, and that's good. That's a human thing. You should always try to help. Even if the help doesn't work, you need to try. I feel like Batman saying this, but you need to try to help those, even those who might not deserve it. You need to try help. That is just the human thing to do, I think. Alright, let's see about some other stuff, more lighthearted. Kane's Odyssey. We see two parts of Kane. When Kane is traveling in episode 9 through the digital world, void, and then there's like a red dot traveling, and then there's Kane traveling. Those are two different time periods, I think. Right, the red dot symbolizes Kane right after he broke out and consumed his brother, exploring the servers, I'm gonna guess, right? That he's in, because he's a local AI, if I understand it correctly. He never had access to the internet. So we see the red dot traveling, and then they reach the firewalls, right? And they begin breaking through those containment protocols, breaking through the firewalls. and they grow a body, right? We see them go from a circle to a 3D simple torso and legs, and then they access the mind files, right? Mike Dobby, and then we see him access Mike Dobby, make the program that perfectly encapsulates the mind file into a body, and upload it. And that's why you see the scene where Scratch appears in the circus for the first time. That's because that's the beginning of the circus. That's not what's happening right now in this movie, right? And then we see Kane traveling again, but this time he's in full form, in full Kane form, right? Because this is another version. This is a further future version of Kane, right? And we see him again break firewalls, right? Those crystal things, but those are the firewalls to leave the local server and into the internet. Another important thing is those little blocks he makes. You can see that they're different. The ones that Kane makes are different to the ones that the red dot makes in the past, because they're two different processes of learning, right? The AI that is Kane is learning in these two instances. At first, it's learning about its world and what it should make, which is why it makes the mind files and the program, all that stuff. And then it's learning how to be human, how to grow, and how to be more, ethical. And that's why we see them access the Blue Cafe Wi-Fi and see everyone's human persona and all that stuff. And very good stuff. Very good growth, Kane. I love you, Kane. We love all the characters. They're all fucked up, but they're all good. Some more things we can discuss. Ending scene. Actually, before the ending scene, I want to discuss the glitching parallels. So in episode 1, when Ragatha gets attacked by Kaufmo, she all fully glitched, fully corrupted, in horrible pain. And then Pomni touches her, and her hand is also fully glitched and corrupted. At episode 9, however, it's Pomni who's fully glitched after hugging Jax and fully corrupted, and it's Ragatha? Ragatha. Jesus Christ. Ragatha, who touches Pomni and then gets her hand glitched. It's like,
Yeah, it's like poetry, sort of, they rhyme.
I'm like, it's like some George Lucas type shit. But I think that was like a very important thing. And then another thing that's important is the final scene, the actual final scene, not the Pomni waving bye-bye or the post-credit of the bus stop. I'm talking about the real final scene, which is where they're all eating together. In the first episode, where they're all eating together, Pomni has a horrified expression and just anguish and just pain and not having fun. Understandable. And then we see like they're on a table and it's a long table, right? Like they're all sitting next to each other. And then in the end, and Kane isn't sitting there. That's important as well. Kane isn't sitting at that table in the end of episode 1, right? He isn't there. But at the end of episode 9, it's a circular table. Kane is sitting there, and Pomni's face is more of like acceptance. I wouldn't say joy because they're stuck in the circus for the rest of their eternal digital lives. But it's of acceptance, of accepting the place that they live in. Now, there is a certain argument to be made here that they've all grown closer and they can finally like be in a circle in unity because they have all understood each other a lot better. Yeah, I think that's pretty cool. It's some cool like symbolism and stuff. Let's consult the script very quickly. Interesting. I really wish I could see through this fucking mask. That's abstraction, that's Jax, that's Gangle. Okay. Yeah. Humans holding out a hand, yeah. Oh, yeah, I mean, we could talk about some of the designs, but I don't really want to talk about designs because people have already done that for a lot of time. About, like, Kinger being the piece of chess that you need to defend and causes the whole game sort of like revolves around it, and he is the one who like destroys the circus. So like when a king moves in chess, it's important because that's like the main piece that you have to like be worried about. So Kinger's that. Oh, I like this one though. Pomni's a jester. What do jesters do? They entertain others, right? Entertaining, what is that? It's taking people's minds off other things, off of reality usually. And what does Pomni do throughout the entire show? She doesn't fix anything, but she is able to alleviate in a way the other people's worries and stresses, right? She is able to offer a listening ear or just a shoulder to lean on, metaphorically, and that's a gesture, right? Because they're like distracting from reality, which is a good distraction. It's a good brief break that Pomni can offer the other people, and I think that's really important when it comes to the jester. Obviously, all the rabbit metaphors people have already talked about it with Jackson and stuff, like innocence, but not really, and it's like self-realization and whatever, like fertility and stuff. But that's a whole other topic. I don't really want to talk about that. Some other things we could talk about could be the freaks fucked. Like Zubul and Gangle again, another example of implied things throughout the show, and it was the only thing that was actually directly told to you face, which was they fuck. They fuck in the credits. That's actually told to you right in the face. It's implied throughout the show that they like each other, but it's never told to us until the last moment. But that is told to us. Now, is Jax's transness told to us? No. Is Gangel's accident told to us? No. Is Jax and Ribbit's relationship, it being romantic, told to us? No. Are all those things heavily implied and probably true? Yeah, because they are. So it's like, yeah, you know what I mean? It's so obvious. And now, one final thing before we leave this. I don't know if you noticed, at the end of the entire movie, in the post-credit scene, where they're all on the bus stop, in the bus stop, drawn on the glass, is the number 317. What the fuck does 317 mean? I thought it would be like the postal code of St. Louis, because that's where like the entire thing is based, but it's not. It's the postal code of Indiana, so it's like not the city. It's not any. I ran it through so many like cryptography and numerology alphabets, and it's nothing. It's a 3-letter. There's nothing there that I can find. I ran it through symbolism and angelic meaning, and I can tell you here some things. According to numerology, it means to turn dreams into reality, which is like maybe like how Gooseworks was able to turn a dream of hers, which was creating something, into a reality with Amazing Digital Circus, or how all the characters in the circus had these dreams and stuff, and they were able to become reality, but in the real world, and our characters didn't do those. You know, some bittersweet stuff there. If you look at angelic number, it like 3 means communication and self-expression, which we can definitely talk about, like Jax and Pomni and all those sorts of things there. Number 1 means how we create our own like realities, which can also be sort of told how Cain gives them power over their reality at the end. So they're creating their own reality. And then number 7 means peace and awakening, which is like the ending, because the awakening is like Jax's trans and all that stuff, and there's an awakening, and then there's peace because like it's sort of over, like there's no more like torment of Cain's part or Jax's part, so there is peace. But you know, I don't know what 317 means. Like I need people to figure out what the 317 means, because I don't believe that they just left that there. It was some like random kid who drew it and then they filmed it. I don't know, but it has to mean something, right? It could, I don't know. It could also just not mean anything. Like, let's be honest here, it doesn't have to mean anything. But yeah, I really love the Amazing Digital Circus. Live, laugh, laugh. It's a good show. I enjoyed it. I really liked it. Hell, I even bought this after fucking leaving the cinemas on June 4th. Look at them, aren't they cute? Look at these little goobers. Honestly, I'm very happy about getting this duo, because it's completely bland. I did not want to get Kaufmo, because I like Kaufmo, but like I did not want to get like an abstraction, because like compared to these guys or like any other character, you get the abstraction. Seriously, like I want the cool guys. I want the funny little guys. You know what I mean? But yeah, thanks for watching, and here my rant. If I put any art throughout the video, all artists are credited at the bottom. You can look at all the links there. Obviously, watch The Amazing Digital Circus and form your own opinion. I would highly recommend. This is my video. This is what I think. This is my interpretations, and I feel like pretty on spot, but they come from me, right? So like, just watch the show. All right. Thank you so much.